Call the meeting to order. Could I have a roll call when you're ready?
Mr. Ackerson?
Here.
Ms. Billman? Here. Mr. Fell?
Here.
Mr. Fitch?
Here.
Mr. Hopkins? Ms. Wadrago? Here. Mr. Weisskopf?
Here.
And Ms. Hugh?
Here.
We have a quorum. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No.
Approval of the minutes of the March 7th, 2019 Plan Commission meeting. Any motions on the minutes? Mr. Fell?
I will move to approve the minutes.
Motion by Mr. Fell, second by Ms. Billman. Any changes to the minutes? All those in favor of approving the minutes of the March 7, 2019 Plan Commission meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The meetings are approved. We now have plan case. Are there any communications?
No, there are not.
Okay, then continued public hearings. Plan case 2359 T18, application by the zoning administrator to amend the zoning ordinance with changes to Article 2, Article 5, and Article 6, and other relevant sections to facilitate solar energy system installation. This case is continued to the May 9th, 2019 Plan Commission meeting. We now have planned cases 2373 PUD 19 and 2374 PUD 19, a request by Chris Saunders of 1007 West University LLC for preliminary and final approval of mixed-use planned unit development at 1007 and 1011 West University Avenue under Section 13.3 of the Urbana zoning ordinance. Mr. Garcia.
Okay, good evening. So this is, as the title suggests, these two cases are for preliminary and final approval of a mixed-use PUD at 1007 and 1011 West University. That's where the Nero Zeros is, across from Campus Circle, if that helps locate the site in your mind. The request is to do commercial on the first floor, and then 4 stories of residential, and that would include 76 units and 124 bedrooms. The first story would also have some amenity space for the residents, and then parking would be sort of hidden behind the building and also underneath the building on the south side of the site. You may recall the Nero's site was subject of a special use permit that came to the Plan Commission back in about a little over a year ago. And that case was for a mixed-use building only on the Nero's site, because at that time the university owned, let me pull up a location map for you. The university owned the site on the corner of, the university owned, let's see, this site right here, which you'll see as part of the entire site, was owned by the university as a pretty underused parking lot. But at the time the university owned it, and since the SUP was approved, Mr. Saunders was able to purchase that site from the university. So the current development before you, planned unit development, it's for a much more cohesive site plan, a much more cohesive development. It uses both lots. It doesn't leave that corner lot vacant. And then it places the building. You can kind of see the building footprint on this screen here, but I can pull up actual site plan here. So you'll see it places the building towards the university side of the site, so it doesn't have that parking area in front, which from a design perspective is far superior. Also, one thing to note, if you look at the current site, you see there are 2 driveways along University Avenue. This proposal would eliminate those 2 driveways, so the access to the site would really be improved as well. In addition, with planned unit development cases, when applicants ask for waivers, the city usually wants to see some sort of public benefit in return. And in this case, the applicant has agreed to reconstruct Mulberry Alley across the entire southern boundary of their site to reconstruct that alley to city standards at their expense. Let's see. Let me pull up the rendering of the site. So the site would be 5 stories. It'd be 62 feet tall, which is the same height as Campus Circle, which is right across the street. And why don't I? Actually, I've got some photos of the site, so let me, if you bear with me. Okay, here we go. Just to give a little more background, if you haven't been out to see the site, my bike is not always there, but it's here in this picture. So this is the western. This is that lot that was owned by the university. The Nero site you can see through the trees. So this is looking east. It might be kind of hard to see, but the alley is in pretty not good condition, let's say. So it would be nice to have that alley reconstructed. Okay, and then a little more of the alley there. And then looking north, so you see Campus Circle is right across the way. Just one note from an urban design perspective, it's good to have like things facing each other across the street. So it would be really complementary to have another, a similar 5-story mixed-use building across the street from Campus Circle. Looking southeast, you see south of the site there are 3.5-story apartment buildings as well. Looking west, there's a 1-block square parking lot which is owned by the university. In their comprehensive plan, they've identified this site as an area for a medical enterprise building, which I'm not sure exactly what that means, but that would be 5 to 6 stories tall and would be built in the long term, so we're probably looking at maybe 10 years out or so. Looking east, so this is at the northwest corner of the site. You can see Nero's there. Also, you see the footprint of the old university building that had been there. I do want to mention, since we're looking at the sidewalk, that IDOT, the Illinois Department of Transportation, is investing millions of dollars to upgrade the sidewalks and signals and things along University Avenue, all the way to between Cunningham Avenue and Wright Street. So that'll the walking environment here will be improved. And we feel that with the building coming right up near the sidewalk, that would make that would further improve the pedestrian environment. Here's the Nero site. It's about 1,000 square foot building. It's mostly drive-through and walk-up traffic for that. And just to get some perspective, I went over and I stood in front of Campus Circle and took a picture from what I figured was about 5 feet away, just to sort of try and get a feel of what it might feel like to stand next to the proposed planned unit development. And you don't really feel, I think because the awning is there, you don't really feel that you're standing next to a really tall building. And if you look at the design that's proposed, there are similar awnings sort of in front of the commercial spaces over here, certainly along the corner here. So I think the design would be pretty pleasant to walk by. Probably more pleasant than walking by a parking lot, which of course is what's there now. Okay, so the comprehensive plan identifies this area as campus mixed use, which I'll just read part of that definition. So it says urban designed mixed-use buildings which include business/office on the ground floor and residential on the upper floors. So that's exactly what's before you today. And I did want to note that, so with this definition of campus mixed use, I was kind of curious if you can actually really do mixed-use buildings along this, or in this area identified as campus mixed use, without asking for some sort of waivers from the zoning ordinance. And I looked at the adjacent sites. So, well, actually, I looked at the Nero site by itself. where are my notes here? So I looked at the Nero site by itself, also the Taco Bell that's next to Nero's, and then the Dairy Queen that's further down. So if you wanted to do a mixed-use building with a restaurant in it the size of Nero's, which is 1,000 square feet, that site currently has 3 excess parking spaces. So if you wanted to put anything else on that site, you'd have all of 3 parking spaces to work with. So you'd probably need to get some sort of waiver for parking to do a mixed-use building on that site. Same goes for Taco Bell. They have 5 excess spaces, which isn't going to get you much more. Dairy Queen has no excess spaces, so you couldn't actually do a mixed-use building on any of those sites with, with the current size of restaurant use they have. So I thought that was interesting to point out. Let's see. Okay, so the waivers, that's a decent segue into the waiver request. So the waivers that are requested are for parking and for setbacks. And the parking, the amount of parking that so if this were a by right development, or if it was a development that met our regulations, the site would require at least 87 parking spaces. The proposal provides 33 parking spaces, which is a 62% reduction. And that seems like a large reduction, but we have noticed in our own staff studies that we've done, and also in data that Mr. Saunders provided for other developments that he has that are similar. They're student-oriented developments. So we've seen in those developments that the demand is just not at what our zoning ordinance requires. At a minimum, our zoning ordinance requires 1 space for every 2 bedrooms. In a lot of these developments, we're seeing demand for about 1 space for sometimes every 5 bedrooms, so significantly less. If you want to see more information on that, Exhibit F of your packet has more of those numbers. But since I'm talking about that, I do want to point out that none of the apartments in Exhibit F have any demand that's even close to 1 space for every 2 bedrooms. There's a graph in your staff memo that kind of shows that. And one interesting thing I wanted to point out with respect to the data provided by Mr. Saunders and that graph is that there is one development in Urbana that was built recently. That was at 809 West Nevada, and that was a by right development. They provided 33 parking spaces for residents. They're only leasing out, I think, 21 spaces, so they are leasing out the 12 additional spaces to the Jimmy John's across the street. So that met our requirements, but our requirements created excess supply. In the staff memo that you have on pages 3 and 4, you'll see that the proposed development meets a lot of the goals and objectives from the comprehensive plan. I'm not going to read all of those because it meets a lot of them. I did just want to point out a couple ones that I think are key. One is goal number 4, which is to promote a balanced and compatible mix of land uses that will help create long-term viable neighborhoods. Goal 16 is to ensure that new uses are compatible with and enhance the existing community. Number 18, to promote infill development. This is a pretty underutilized site, mostly parking right now, so it would certainly meet that. Goal number 19 is to provide a strong housing supply to meet the needs of a diverse and growing community. Goal 26, to improve the appearance of Urbana's commercial and industrial areas. I think the design would certainly be an improvement over the sea of parking that is there right now. And one final one, Goal 49, to avoid development patterns that can potentially create an over-dependency on the automobile. This is mixed-use, student-oriented development. This is as close to the university as you can get here. This is the last developable site along University Avenue that you could use for something like this, so it certainly meets that goal. In addition, there are goals in the zoning ordinance for planned unit developments. There are 9 in total. I'm not going to go through all of those, but this development is consistent with goals 1 through 7 for the PUD ordinance. With respect to the request for setback waivers, so you'll note you'll see the building's pretty, whoops, wrong way. The building would be pretty close to, let's do that one. Relatively close to the sidewalk, 5 feet at its closest point. On the north side, I've already discussed how I don't think that would be a problem. It is nice to have the building close to the sidewalk instead of parking there. 5 feet on the west side, about 12 or 13 feet on the east side, and then pretty close to the alley. But we don't feel that there would be any real negative impacts to the adjacent property owners if the building was that close, which is really what setbacks are kind of there to do, is to make sure that a building's not close so that it's going to cause a nuisance. So for planned unit developments, we have a series of criteria that are required for approval. Again, as with other things, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I did want to point out, I did want to go through number 5. So this is on page 10 of your staff memo. And that criteria is that the proposed development is responsive to the relevant recommended design features identified in the zoning ordinance. And this, the proposed development uses or meets a number of the features that are suggested in that part of the ordinance, including architectural design. This is a high-quality, well-designed building, so it meets that goal. Access, which I mentioned earlier, it would be closing two driveways along University Avenue. It would also shift the driveway along Harvey Street to the south, which should, it's always nice when you can get a driveway further away from an intersection. So we feel like that would really improve not just safety for people driving by, or improve traffic flows for people driving by, but also for people walking. They don't have to walk across. They wouldn't have to walk across 2 driveways that people could be turning across. The third is bicycle parking. So they'll provide at least what is required, the 40 spaces, but I've been in contact with the applicant, also with the architect. They can fit in, I know on the site plan in front of you it says 25 to 30 spaces. That area can be expanded a little bit, and they could probably fit the 40 required bikes just in that space. Also, there are areas where they could also have covered bike parking for visitors to the businesses. So for instance, in this area to the east of the mechanical building, they can put bike parking. There's also an opportunity to put some covered short-term bike parking down here, and I think they identified a couple of other spaces. So while our zoning ordinance doesn't require covered bike parking, it is really nice to have, especially this. Not only will the bike parking that's identified on the plan in front of you be covered, it's also going to be secured, like with a locked gate there. So that should be a good amenity for residents to have. Also, one of the PUD design standards talks about maximum parking, and it says to provide the proper amount of parking based on data from similar, based on other data. And in this case, they provided data for similar student-oriented projects in Urbana and Champaign. Also, from staff studies that we did a couple of years ago, we think that that the amount of parking they're providing is appropriate. And finally, number 5 is rear parking. So that talks about putting your parking areas behind the building, which they're doing in this case. It will be well hidden, so it'll really improve, again, the environment for people going by on University Avenue or along the sidewalk there. That really wraps up my presentation. There are a few options in these cases. So for both the preliminary and for the final planned unit development cases, you can recommend approval of the development plans. You can recommend approval of the plans, including adding any conditions, or you can recommend denial or disapproval of the plans. The staff recommendation is to recommend to the council that they approve both the preliminary and final PUD with a few conditions. One is that construction be in general conformance with the attached site plan and elevations. 2 is that the applicant will have the alley on the south side of the parcels reconstructed to city standards. And 3 is that that bicycle parking area under the building will be fenced and secured. Just to briefly conclude, this is a development proposal that I think really exemplifies what the PUD ordinance is going for. It's going for higher quality, often mixed-use types of development. So this really speaks to what the ordinance is asking for. So I can take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Any questions for Mr. Garcia? Mr. Fell?
We're okay with repaving half an alley?
We are. I mean, they can't, we wouldn't really have much standing to ask for someone to repave a whole alley.
I agree with that, but we're only going to fix half an alley? And part 2, is city staff consider, I have no idea what other use happens in this alley. Have we considered vacating the alley?
Well, the apartment buildings to the south definitely use that. Let's see what I can find. So there's parking all, as you can see, there's parking here that comes off the alley. The Taco Bell parking doesn't come off the alley, but I believe this parking
Comes off Gregory.
Okay, sorry. Well, I know these 2 apartment buildings take access off that alley. So essentially, they would benefit from half of the alley being paved as well.
Okay.
Further? Mr. Ackerson?
I have a-
Excuse me, you could be next.
Yes, so you've addressed the issue of parking, and I think I've spoken before about how I'm in favor of high density and looking at mass transit and walking and alternative forms of transportation. You addressed kind of like for like in other developments for residential, but because it's a mixed-use facility, I think the main difference between this and the facility down in Nevada, where we, excuse my language, but we made them, if you will, or they were required to build more parking than they needed, is that that's primarily residential, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah, it's
as I
entirely
recall.
residential.
And this one's anticipating retail. So I haven't heard anything about traffic volume for the retail aspect of this development. Could you address that?
Sure, and so let me go to the site plan. So it's we kind of assume that the parking labeled private parking, so all of this over here would be for the residential, and then the parking over here would probably be it could be for retail, for those retail uses. Let me see. There's 14 spaces over there, which should be adequate to serve that retail space.
I guess one of the issues for me is I don't know what kind of retail is going in there, but then since we're asking for planned unit development, one thing could go in and it could change later on. So there's low volume retail and there's high volume retail, and that's what I was hoping to hear addressed.
We can bring that more in discussion.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Further questions, Ms. Yu?
Yeah, I was wondering if you can provide a perspective in terms of setback. Do you know for the Latitude development, how far is their setback?
That's a good question. I did talk to the planner over in Champaign about Latitude. I know it meets their setbacks. I can't remember the
Which was
exact-
0 at the time.
That looks like it.
Okay.
Looks
Thank
like
you.
0. Yeah.
Okay.
Good question. Further questions for Mr. Garcia? Mr. Weiskopf?
Just real quick, the map you had, the future use map,
Yeah,
can you throw that up?
sure.
So right now, that upper triangle there, the institutional and community business,
Yeah, so
that actually now is what?
well, right now the institutional / community business is the retreat. So it's the
Right.
townhouse development.
So former American Water,
Correct.
which is why it would have said,
Yeah.
okay. And that now, just to refresh my memory, what's that zoning?
They rezoned that to R4.
Right. And then, what is the parking requirement for B3 zoning?
It all depends on the use.
Okay.
Further questions? Ms. Billman?
On the first floor plan, what's the difference between amenity and retail space?
So I think the applicant could probably speak to that, but since all of the upper floors are residential, I assume that's space for the residents to have use of.
Like exercise equipment or
Yeah.
something? Okay.
Or just, yeah, hangout area, common area.
On page 1, the first paragraph, the applicant seeks zoning flexibility, and flexibility is mentioned other places too. Why is that term used instead of variance? Instead of,
Because that's the term that's in the planned unit development section of the ordinance. But it's essentially the same thing as like a waiver. It's not quite the same as a variance. I'm not exactly sure what the difference would be, except that a variance would go to the zoning board.
okay. And also that alley, will they be required to maintain it after they put it in?
That would be, it is a public alley, so we would be required to maintain it, but it would be installed to city standards. We'd make sure of that, so it should, and I think our standards are pretty sturdy, so.
Thank you.
Mr.
I have
Fell?
a quick question. Do we know if Campus Circle's commercial space is rented? Have they rented any of their commercial space yet?
They have not. I was just over there today. They're still for lease.
Further questions for Mr. Garcia? Thank you
Thanks.
very much. I'll remind everybody of the rules for public input in a Plan Commission case. The petitioner can address the Plan Commission and talk about the project and explain its benefits, and then also may receive questions from the Commission. Following that, anyone in favor of the petition can address the Commission. Following that, anyone opposed to the proposal could address the Commission. And finally, the petitioner will have the last chance to talk to us. Then we will close the public input portion and discuss and possibly vote. So, sir, if you could just state your name.
Chris Saunders, Green Street Realty. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Kevin did such a good job there that I'll probably just be answering questions at this time, but I do have some input, a little bit of a few things that I could probably address, that some of the questions that came up along the way. You know, the retail space, especially as University Avenue is changing, where we show amenity, that may end up likely being retail space as well. I mean, we've got a lobby area that's also tenant amenity space. So we obviously would rather have a decent amount of retail space there if we can get a retail user that might be an office user, or in this case, I think with as much as going on, walkable from this location now with Campus Circle across the street, these new beds, the Retreat project, and the Gather project. I mean, I think you're going to have a 1,500 or so beds, maybe more than that. There, close to 2,000 people on that corner that are going to be walkable, really difficult to drive. And I think some of these retail users will choose those things. I think a lot of this is demand driven. A retail tenant that looks at our space that has really high traffic needs and lots of parking needs, or a drive-through, just simply isn't gonna lease this type of space. So I think, and there's plenty of options in the market for them. And it goes the same thing with the parking reduction. It's not that I'm in favor of no parking. We've done developments with no parking because it's allowed in some spaces in Champaign, but it's demand driven. And if parking for a resident right now is the number one priority, I've got to have parking. This is not going to probably be the development for them where they're going to live. They could go across the street and there's a large parking deck where Campus Circle has it, and they may rent there or somewhere else. And even the projects that were built, years ago have a lot more parking requirements too. So we find in our residential buildings that we've got a lot of excess parking in certain buildings, and that's oftentimes where we might direct a resident to say, hey, we don't have anything, but the building next door has space available. And a lot of the students seem to bring cars and typically are not driving a lot during the week and may just be parking anyhow. So we're not concerned to spend this kind of money and feel that parking is going to be a real big issue for us here. And I don't think, even if there was no buildings there, we couldn't get the 87 required parking spaces even on the lots. And this is almost 30,000 square feet. They wouldn't even fit if we laid it out. I don't believe it'd be awfully close. So again, those things aren't concerns for me. We last time we came here, some of you I think are new to the commission. We pitched a project without the university lot, and it was kind of awkward. We tried to keep Nero Giro's in there. We're hoping Nero's would go back in with all the walkable traffic there without a drive-through. We're going to approach that with them, but it just became odd with that small lot that we had not having the extra space. It just so happens I walked out of the meeting here and the University Foundation was here and said, hey, we want to sell you our lot. And we obviously wanted that and thought we could get a much better development on it, having that extra space. And this being the first property you see as you're traveling west to east in Urbana on that side of the street, this is it. And right now it's a parking lot from a building that exploded at night and a 1,000 square foot retail user. So it's not a very attractive site. I think this, some of the comments we had last time were to actually push this building more towards the street, like the one on the corner. And we also had feedback on some of the finishes and the way it was laid out with parking, and we kind of took those things into account. Last time, our only comment from neighbors was the alley. Wasn't even a comment directed at us. I think it was a city comment that, hey, will somebody do something about this alley back here? We have the two buildings right behind it, and it's all torn up. And with Kevin's help, I think we kind of came up with, that seems like a pretty reasonable request for us to show that we're, do something that's going to benefit not just us, but the public in general. If you're on campus there in that area, a lot of people are using those alleys to get in and out of the restaurants that are right around there or turn the wrong way and things like that. So this will certainly help. I'm not super familiar what it's like as you go any further than our building, but this gets a good stretch of that taken care of. And like Kevin said, that would be part of we'd have some requirements on their end to do it to the standards that the city requires. That's kind of, we also, I also want to point out too that we did a mix in this building of 1s and 2 bedrooms, heavy, 36 1s, 36 2s, and just 4 bedrooms. In your current parking requirements, you get dinged harder for 1 bedrooms. It's 0.7 spaces as opposed to 0.5 for a 2 bedroom. So that kind of hurts us too on that. We think 1s, this we anticipate being obviously mostly students, but we are in the the medical corridor there with the medical school. OSF, Carl. We anticipate this, with this mix, we'll likely get young professionals and people that, work at those locations as well. We see the same thing at Third and University in Champaign, the building we put up last year. We're getting students, but we're getting 15, 20%, maybe even 25% non-students that may work downtown or work in the hospitals there. So, and that particular building, Mr. Fell designed, and it's 129 beds, 13,000 feet of retail, and I believe we have 33 parking spaces there, about the same as this, and it's about the same size. Bed-wise, there's quite a bit of more retail in that particular building.
Thank you. Further questions for Mr. Saunders? Mr. Fell?
You made mention, not necessarily of Nero's, but some place going in that may want to drive through, which I assume is going to go on the east side where, I'd ask your architect, but I assume that's, the building is set back larger because of a fire separation distance. But assuming something goes in here potentially with a drive-through, I'm guessing it's going on the east side?
Yeah, I don't think we have any intention at this point of trying to get the drive-through in. It was too complicated last time.
Well, it's fit now.
There may
I
be
mean,
room, yeah, there may be
my-
room to do it. We could leave the option open.
Well-
Last time, I believe the commission gave us some flexibility
Yeah.
on that. And I think last time, if I remember right, there's some, not a real clear definition, the current zoning on restaurant use versus, I can't remember what the
Fast
two
food, I
terms
think it
were.
was.
One required 7 spaces and one required 47 spaces or something,
But
so.
Yeah, it was the queue, too.
The gist
Yeah.
of my question is, you don't have a curb cut to get out. Is it a desire to have the option to add a curb cut, which we'll discuss later?
It would
but-
be, it would be great flexibility to have it,
Okay.
especially if we had a Nero's type thing. I think last time also we discussed about the alley not being able to be an area of stacking. I can't remember it completely. So we, in our minds, just kind of got rid of this idea there'd be a drive-through there. But certainly if there was a way to do it and it worked for everybody, we'd be open for that. But it's not a deal killer on our end. We'd love to keep Nero's there. I think they want to stay. They've been successful there. But again, I was more hoping to get him to stay with the idea you've got all this new development going on there and a lot more foot traffic.
Further questions for Mr. Saunders? Mr. Ackerson?
Not so much a question as a clarification. If I'm hearing you right, and you're talking about, for example, Nero's, you might anticipate retail. Am I hearing you right that you would anticipate retail is going to be more walk-up traffic?
I think so, yeah. We've got some other developments like this, and I expect on University Avenue to be pretty popular, as we expect. We've got a development on Green Street very similar to this. And I think in these walkable spaces, we're going to get a certain tenant. And we do a lot of commercial leasing. A lot of these groups are very specific on what they need. I mean, this site would be eliminated and likely wouldn't even get contacted by many of them just based on the setup that we have. I anticipate this being a walkable type tenant, although it's quite conceivable to see people pulling in all the extra parking next door at some of the restaurants and walking over and grabbing something. But I think it's going to be a walkable type tenant. Maybe it's an office user for part of it. We do think we're going to lease this. We're not doing this as fluff. We're going to price this pretty competitively, and we've got a lot of interest right now in our retail sites, and I expect this to be very, very popular with the location that it's in, and just that we can advertise all the potential foot traffic there's going to be in a spot like this over the next 2 years or so.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Does anybody wish to speak to the commission in favor of this petition? Does anybody wish to speak to the commission who is opposed to this petition? No? In that case, I will close the public input section of this hearing, and we'll go to discussion. Discussion. Mr. Fell.
I'll go first. Parking. I got 2 anecdotes, I guess. One is, I had a client, a major campus town apartment client, who, interestingly enough, came in my office on Tuesday to talk about a project and how much parking he wanted to put in it, and he did his own study on parking in campus in Champaign, and all of his properties were built when the parking requirements in Champaign were slightly less stringent than they are now in Urbana. And he currently leases 31% of his parking to his residents. He leases 34% of it to other people, and 1% is vacant because he can't rent it. So I think a demand of parking roughly on the order of a third of what our zoning ordinance says is about what gets used. So in terms of the residential parking, I'm fine with that. In terms of the retail parking, I'm going to say I'm fine with that too, because what tends to happen, and I get clients to come to me that want different retail spaces, and some of them want a certain amount of space, but they don't need very much parking. And if they need a large space with little amount of parking, they can't find that. They have to pay for more parking than they need because that's what comes with the space they rent. So I think having the flexibility of retail spaces that can essentially reduce their leasing rate because their overhead is less and their tenants need less parking is a good alternative to have, and we don't have that now. So for me, I have absolutely no problem with the reduction in the amount of parking they have. So I'll stop there.
Anything further on parking or the setbacks or any other aspect? Mr. Ackerson?
I still remember the last year's proposal, and I like this one a lot better. I like that it's closer to the street. I'm glad you listened on that. I'm fine with the parking for residential for the reasons that you stated and what we've seen in terms of developments around. I think you have to look at it in context, in terms of location. And in this location, a lot of people living, but I agree that could be a lot of walk-up. Depending on what goes into that retail space is sort of like the big question for me. But I could certainly see whether it's a Nero's or a coffee shop or maybe you got a little office space. I'm a little leery about, Chris probably knows a lot more about the demand for office space than we do, but we've heard other people say, oh, there's a glut of it, and then other, I don't know. This is a prime location because of the proximity to the medical campuses and the university. I think if you wanted something like a drive-through or something where a lot of people are pulling in and out to do business, restaurant, retail, whatever it's going to be, I think that could be a problem. But if it's mostly a walk-up or using public transportation or they're riding a bike, I think it's going to be fine. And finally, I'll just say I applaud the effort to have secure bike space, to have a covered, secure bike space. Covered bike space makes a lot of difference to those of us who ride bikes, as you know, Kevin. And there's nothing like getting on a wet seat to discourage you from riding one. So I think I'm okay with it, too.
Okay. Further discussion? Ms. Billman?
For one thing, that curb cutout there, I like not having it unless things change. I just think it can cause more congestion along University.
Yeah.
And my main concern with this development was parking, and now I'm fine with it. And I like the front facade much better than the apartments across the street or further down in Champaign. Because it's not flat across the front, there's, some cutouts there. So I'm feeling good about this.
Okay. Further discussion? Mr. Weisskopf?
Yeah, just that I echo the sentiments about being fine with the parking and just the sentiments that, ultimately, providing more bike parking, encouraging people to think about walking places, discouraging people from bringing cars, discouraging the amount of cars we have on the roads. This is all, I think, good. And I think we shoot ourselves in the foot sometimes, requiring so many cars. I mean, ultimately, so I like it.
Okay. Anything else? I'll just add that I'm in agreement with the tone of the discussion, and I would like at some point that, I know city staff, you're very busy people, but if we could look at our parking requirements sometime. This is a topic that comes up frequently. And there's certain areas where it's probably appropriate what we have, others possibly not. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents. Mr. Feld.
I have more of a city staff question. The applicant has said that the spaces labeled amenity and lobby spaces might change if there's more retail demand. So my question is, as a approval, general conformance to the site plan, that flexibility is still in there? They're not listening to me.
I think they did. I have to do a sidebar.
They're not listening.
They got it.
Well, we could, if you're concerned about that, we, or you rather, could recommend a further reduction in the parking just to cover that in the future.
My
question is, when we, assuming we approve this with general conformance to the site plan, do they have the flexibility to alter the boundary between their retail and their amenity space, increasing the retail, diminishing the amenity space?
Sure.
I think it would be beneficial to be clear. And so what Kevin was suggesting is that in the event they want to do that in the future, what it does is it increases the waiver that they're requesting for parking. So if you can make that clear in your motion, that, and we can do the quick calc, I think it'd be 4 extra spaces if it's retail, just so that if it does happen 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, we want to make sure that we can say it is in general conformance because, in fact, the waiver that was granted was for X number of parking spaces, which could make that be retail in the future. Does that make sense?
I mean, I think is it good enough to say that if they change it in that way and change the parking requirement, it's no longer in general conformance? I think that's the question.
That's my concern. So that if you were to recommend a waiver of a different number of parking spaces, that would allow them to have more flexibility to turn that amenity space into retail. Yeah.
You mean we could say up to
Right.
X number of spaces?
Mm-hmm. That would also perhaps allow.
I don't know what that number would be, though.
Kevin's
He's
working
got
on
his
his calculator.
calculator.
Give us just a second. It's just easier to make it clearer so that future people don't need to read it and try to figure out if it is what you intended.
Makes sense. All right.
So right now, they require for the retail space
17
17 spaces. Yeah. They would require 20 for if that were converted. Yeah, or I guess, well,
What if it's converted as I don't know what to build, what the zoning
if it's a
ordinance calls
restaurant.
it. A restaurant use?
Yeah, well. So,
Well-
as is, if the entire thing were a restaurant, it would be 112
Right.
required spaces total for everything. So that would add another 8 spaces, so 120 total spaces.
Or if we're
required.
worried about numbers, I suppose you could just suggest a condition that allows flexibility in the site plan without an impact on the parking requirement to allow conversion of the amenity space and/or the retail space to restaurant, and that would be the most intensive use that would likely go in there. So then we don't have to worry about numbers?
Yeah, I'm not sure we have to worry about numbers either. I mean, there's 33 spaces. If they reconfigure the use a little bit, there's still 33 spaces. So that just means fewer for one and more for the other use, right?
I really would recommend you be clear in some way. So if you do
Okay.
a condition that allows flexibility, then I think that gives them a lot more assurances, and it guarantees we won't be fighting about this 10 years down the road if it happens.
Okay. I'm going to write some words.
And we can always fix them a little bit later if we need to.
You
so.
probably will need to. Okay. So I would propose adding something like this to the first condition. And it would say that construction be in general conformance with the attached site plan and elevations, comma, providing flexibility for changing configuration of retail versus amenity space with implications for parking. Something like that? Let's go with that. Any objections? Okay, any further discussion? Any motions? Mr. Fell,
So, I'm in your paper.
do you need the words? This writing, you're not going to make it out.
I got to read my writing. I move that we forward plan cases number 2373-PUD-19 and 2374-PUD-19 to the City Council with a recommendation for approval with the following conditions: that the construction be in general conformance with the attached site plan and elevations, providing flexibility for changing the configuration
Of
of retail versus amenity space with
implications.
without implications for
With-
parking?
with
With
implications for
implications for parking. Someone will clean that up.
Yeah, please.
Number two, that the applicant will have the alley on the south side of the parcels reconstructed to city standards. And number three, that the bicycle parking area under the building will be fenced and secured.
Great. Motion by Mr. Fell. Second by Mr. Ackerson. Further discussion? Can we have a roll call vote when you're ready?
Ms. Spillman?
Yes.
Mr. Fell?
Yes?
Mr. Fitch?
Yes.
Ms. Wadrago?
Yes.
Mr. Weiskopf?
Yes.
Ms. Yu?
Yes.
Mr. Ackerson?
Yes.
Motion is approved. And so do we have a preliminary date for City Council?
April 15th.
April 15th. Thank you. We don't have any old business. So our next case is a new public hearing. It is Plan Case 2371T19, an application by the zoning administrator to amend the zoning ordinance with minor changes to Article 4, Article 6, Article 7, Article 8, Article 9, Article 11, and Article 13. We have a presentation. Ms. Wilcock, and if you could introduce yourself, Sam.
Hello, my name is Samuel Stewart. I am an intern for the community development planning section here.
Great, welcome. Did you say Stewart?
Stewart, yes.
Stewart. With a U or a W?
W.
Got it.
Yes. All right. So this is the zoning ordinance omnibus for Plan Case 2371T19. We are proposing 7 articles be amended. Our first article up is Section 4-3, the official zoning map. The changes that we are proposing would basically allow for the online map to be recognized as the official city zoning map. This would be more beneficial to the public as certain zones often change, and would allow us to not necessarily print a map every March 31st. Key points in this is that the online map will meet the official zoning map requirements by the state, and the staff will only need to update the online zoning map as opposed to anything else.
Just to clarify, we'd still be updating a printed map, but we would, instead of March 31st, it would be anytime the zoning administrator would request official zoning map to be printed and updated.
Yes. All right. Moving on, Section 6.5. We are merely doing a text amendment to the word handicap. We are proposing that it gets switched to accessibility. Next is our conditional use procedures as well as our special use procedures. Currently, what is important is the conditional uses and special uses only allow for owners with 50% of ownership of the property to submit an application, thus placing a burden on them. The new text would allow for any person with evidence of written consent or a contract with the purchaser of the subject property.
Same thing.
And the same thing is also applied for the special use procedures as well. Currently, the Article 8, so Section 8, 3, is focused on the 2001 CUATS management guidelines. They recently updated it in 2013, and so we are proposing a change that we also switch to that. Again, for Section 8.3, we are proposing that we switch handicap to accessible. And then currently Section 8.4, we found the wording to be confusing, so we decided to switch it for better clarification.
And so I think the largest amount of changes that really being proposed tonight is going to be in Article 9, but they're all going to be hopefully pretty easy to understand. For Article 9, sign and OASS regulations, we have a general formatting change to the definition. Our definitions Article 2 doesn't really have bullet points, numbers, or any kind of labeling of that nature, so we wanted to kind of change that formatting so it matches the other areas of the zoning ordinance. And I'm just going to go to document where we've highlighted. I closed the tab bar on this side this time. Thank you. So we did a couple of things with the definitions to try to make it a little bit clearer. First definition that we added something, banner. That definition, we added the word temporary, and we did this with a couple other ones where we just wanted to make it clear where to find these regulations. Banner, you find that mentioned in the temporary regulations section of this article. So we want to make it easier for people to kind of reference the definitions and find where they need to go. Second thing, and this is something that's different than what you saw in your staff memo. This is supposed to be all the way highlighted. We're adding a definition, blade banner. Currently, the zoning ordinance does refer to blade banner or feather flags as a banner, and in banners you have freestanding banners, you have wall banners, and you have vertical banners attached on a pole. So we actually added a definition for that, blade banners. It passes the Google test. If you type in blade banner, that's what comes up, is what we're actually talking about. And we wanted to make that clearer for people because they are a very popular sign format for people around town because they're inexpensive and they're easy to install. And we get a lot of questions about blade banners. And as far as the administration of the zoning ordinance, it really helps to add that. So if you scroll a little ways down, or I scroll and you turn pages, you get to institutional signs. We did add the word non-commercial. If you look up the definition of institution, there's a lot of other stuff that I don't think the zoning ordinance was really meaning to refer to for the definition of institution. So we just wanted to be clear what we were talking about when it comes to institutional signs. If you go a little ways down, you can see the crossed out, we crossed out freestanding sign out of portable sign because the definition of freestanding sign is that it's not portable. So we wanted to make that a little bit clearer. It seemed a little strange. Private traffic, directional and instructional signs. It's a sign that's not required to have a permit. It says on premises with a dash. There's just a quick typo. We want to change that. Projecting sign, we added, and roof sign, we added the word permanent. So again, so you can kind of quickly define what kind of permit you need to apply for those signs. There's 2 different zoning permit applications, and we wanted to make it a little bit clearer. For subdivision sign, we added the word permanent. Again, makes it easier for people to know when they find the right sign that they want to look at. Hey, this is the kind of sign permit application that I'm going to need to get from the city. We go down to section 9.3, measurement standards. We have a couple of things that we just wanted to switch around to make it easier and clearer to read and understand. Again, we're all here in planning. We read this a lot on a regular basis and answer these questions. So it means a lot to us to kind of clear up some of the these sections. Section 9.4, general sign allowances. If you go down to electronic display and then animation, we're not changing any of the content of that. We're just, again, trying to make it a little bit easier to read, a little easier to understand. If we scroll down, now we get to I, temporary signs. And so we did do a little bit of work in this, and after a lot of discussion, we're recommending adding the zoning districts B1, B2, and CCD for temporary signs. And the thought amongst staff was that maybe I wasn't here. I don't think much of us were here when we decided on the zoning districts, but these are a little bit B1, B2 are more residential, and maybe having grand opening signs and inflatables and banners might not be something that we'd want in necessarily more residential zoning districts. I would like to remind everybody that temporary signs are really only open up for a very small amount of time per year. And so if you had a business in B1, B2, or CCD, it would be probably a very minimal nuisance or notice to the neighborhood to have a grand opening sign. And it's nice when you have a business to have those kinds, have the option of having a grand opening sign. So we're suggesting that, we're recommending it. You scroll a little way down into inflatable signs and balloons. We have, we just wanted to make sure everybody knew that you put the apostrophe after the S for that. It's helpful. If you're opening it up, you might as well fix some things. Banners. So here, we're adding the definition blade banner. And so we tried to make this a little bit clearer for people. And hopefully making it easier for people to understand, especially business owners, when they're looking at our sign ordinance, they want to put up a banner. What does the city of Urbana actually say about signs? So here we say banners must be securely fastened at both ends to a building or other structure, or securely fastened along both sides if displayed as a banner secured to the ground, or a blade banner mounted to the ground, or a portable structure. And by portable structure, we're really generally referring to, if you have some sand inside some kind of structure, or whatever's safely securing your sign. And that, again, is not really a change to the purpose of and what the content of this article. I think we make it very clear in other areas that it has to be securely fastened. And we're just trying to, again, clear this up a little bit. The area of each banner shall be restricted to 100 square feet for wall banners, wall-mounted banners, 50 square feet for freestanding banners, and 25 square feet for blade banners. Again, there's not a single change to what we are currently saying in our zoning ordinance. It's just clearing it up and adding the definition of blade banners instead of calling it a vertical banner secured to the ground on one side. Temporary wall-mounted freestanding or blade banner shall be set back at least 10 feet from the property line, or shall be displayed so that the bottom edge of the banner is at least 10 feet above grade level at all points. Again, no change to the purpose of that regulation. We're just trying to make it a little bit easier to understand. Something that we are changing, we're proposing a change. Signs authorized without a permit, there's number 1, flags. No more than 3 flags instead of 2 for each premise. I will say that that's generally when the maximum amount of flags that people tend to think of when they want to put up flags. It's actually what's outside of our city building right now. It's at Europa House. There's several places in Urbana where there's 3 flags instead of 2. We just kind of want to acknowledge that it's probably not going to be, again, much more of a nuisance or any kind of impact to the neighborhood or surrounding properties if we said 3 instead of 2. Yeah.
Define flags for me.
There is a definition.
Thank
of
you.
flag.
Oh,
There
okay.
is
I
an-
didn't bring mine.
And
Yeah.
I didn't bring that up. Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much, Mr. Ackerson. If we go all the way to the top, back at definitions, there was one other typo that I caught. In your staff memo, flag had some changes to the definition. If we do end up coming to you later date proposing a definition change for flag or a modification of some sort, It's currently, it takes a lot more research, so we're researching that, but we're not proposing that tonight. That has been removed. It happened in between when we sent out this and tonight's meeting. So thank you for bringing that up. It was not highlighted under here. I have a note here. Okay, so go back down to temporary signs. Signs authorized without a permit, 3 flags. And these are all of the kind of contextual stuff that we're not proposing changes. So we're going to skip down to table 910, standards for temporary signs. Probably one of the most popular parts of this article for people who are sign professionals in the community when they're talking to their clients or when they're working with people, or what the phone calls that we kind of get and inquiries and people coming into the office. The most popular parts are really these tables in the back of the article. They're really helpful for clearly and graphically describing what the regulations are. And though there's no substitute to actually reading the regulations, it's very helpful for a lot of people to get a clear answer fairly quickly if you have a table. So just about every table, every type of sign in our sign regulations article has a table. Temporary signs, maybe because they're very specific per types of sign, and you can kind of see this is a little busy, there's a lot going on here, but it would make it much more helpful for people who are really concerned about banner wall-mounted or blade banner, to know what are the particular regulations that for theirs. And we did kind of want to make sure that they understood the time, the size requirements. Currently, just this week, we had a temporary sign applicant withdraw their application because though they had read everything in the sign ordinance, they missed the part about 25 square feet, and it was what they had paid someone to print was just too big for them to really be able to kind of modify it to be 25 square feet. And so, I think it would kind of clear things up if they just had a table that they could see all of it. Otherwise they were probably good to go. And then, with the footnotes right there. And that is Article 9's proposed changes. With that, I'm going to take this back to Sam.
Thank you, Lily. Thank you, Lily. So with the zoning board with section 11-3 for the Board of Appeals, what we found is that anyone could actually request a major variance even if they weren't the property owner. So we proposed a text to very similar, the exact text from the special use permit and stuff that only allows applicants that own 50% of the subject property, contract purchaser, or with the consent of the with written consent from the owner to actually go for these major variances. The same thing occurred with the plan unit developments, and we decided to follow suit as well. And then in Article, 13-5, we simply changed the word handicap to accessibility ramps.
Great.
All right.
Any questions? Oh, but you want to, for city staff or for discussion? Oh, sure. Okay.
I really enjoyed the table on signage. I think it's going to increase the ease which entrepreneurs and people who want to help tourism and business and things like that are doing as well. And so that's what we do as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment.
Don't spoil the stat. No, I totally.
But
It's hard. I just started here, and when I was reading through this, I thought it was pretty difficult. And when I started getting phone calls, it was.
So does anybody wish to address the plan commission on this? No? In that case, public input is closed. Thank you very much. You're excused. Any discussion on this? Any motions? Wait.
Sure.
Ms. Dilbert.
I move that we forward plan case number 2371-T-19 to the City Council with a recommendation to approve in its entirety.
Motion by Ms. Billman, very, very nice. Do we have a second? Mr. Ackerson, second. Oh, Ms. Wade-Robert? It's too late, you second. All right. So, let's just go ahead and do a roll call.
Mr. Fell?
Yes?
Mr. Fitch?
Yes.
Ms. Wade-Drago?
Yes.
Mr. Weiskopf?
Yes.
Ms. Yu?
Yes.
Mr. Ackerson?
Yes.
And Ms. Billman?
Yes.
Motion passes. And are we talking April, what was the other date?
15.
April 15th, City Council. All righty. Now, new business. This is a county zoning case, CCZBA 927 AM 19. A request by Dan Cothran to amend the Champaign County zoning map to rezone 3804 North Cunningham from AG2 Agriculture to B4 General Business.
Good evening.
Mr. Garcia.
Again. Okay, so I'm going to try and keep this very brief. So the city has the right to protest county rezoning cases within our extraterritorial jurisdiction, so within 1.5 miles of the city limits. If we file a protest to the county board when the case goes to the county, which in this case would be on April 18th. So the case before you is a rezoning request where the applicant would like to construct a multi-use development. It would have self-storage warehouses, a business office, and a public recreational facility, most likely an indoor basketball court. Out in the county, it's currently zoned agricultural. It's on, as you can see on the location map that I have on the screen, it's at between Oaks Road and Olympian Drive along Cunningham Avenue. All the uses that they're proposing would be allowed if they rezone to B4, so that's why they're going for the rezoning. So Urbana's comprehensive plan identifies this area, identifies pretty much everything north of Oaks Road and east of Cunningham as agricultural. Obviously, this isn't agricultural, but those future land use maps are pretty general by design, especially in areas outside the city limits. We don't, presume to indicate specific uses out in the county. So Cunningham Avenue is pretty commercial in general. And if these parcels were ever annexed into the city, we think that business zoning would be appropriate for this site. So if the properties are rezoned to B4 upon annexation into Urbana, the site would convert to B3 general business, which would allow the office and the recreational uses by right. City requires conditional use permits for self-storage in B3, but that doesn't seem to be a huge issue. So the proposed county zoning designations are appropriate for, if this property ever came into the city. So staff recommends that the Plan Commission recommend that City Council defeat a resolution of protest for this proposed Champaign County zoning map amendment. I can take any questions, especially if they're the usual questions about defeating a resolution of protest, because it's always weird.
Any questions for Mr. Garcia? Ms. Billman?
I should know the answer to this, but what is allowed in County B4? What types of?
Pretty similar stuff to what's allowed in our B3. I'm sorry, I don't have the county zoning ordinance with me. But B4 in the county is their general business district, so it is pretty similar to what we allow in B3.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Mr.
One
Garcia?
question.
Mr. Fell?
How big's this site? It looks
Deadly.
really big.
Oh, how big is that? I think I have that somewhere. I don't know. If it's not in my memo, I don't know it off the top of my head.
I think at the bottom of the first page, it says 5 acres.
Okay,
It does, 5 acres.
thank you. 5 acres, he said definitively.
Yeah. Any further questions? No? Thank you, Mr. Garcia.
Thanks.
Anyone wish to address the Plan Commission on this case? Public input is closed again. Resolution of protest. So that when the county, if you don't know, when the county passes a zoning change that's within our extraterritorial jurisdiction, the city council can protest it. And there's some special majority that applies. Right, exactly. However, what this recommendation is to recommend that the council defeat a resolution of protest should one be offered. So we're voting yes to tell them not to do something. Just so you know. All right. Any further discussion? No? We have a roll call, please. I need a motion. Oh, yeah. The chair knows. Motion. Ms. Drago, you were volunteered last time.
Sure, I can do that.
You can.
Oh, no, where's my language here? It's not up here.
Is your mic
I
on?
think she might have accidentally.
Okay, here we
She-
go.
Better?
I motion to recommend that city council defeat a resolution of protest. That would be that option 1. For case CCZBA 905-AM-18. A request to rezone a property from AG2 to B4.
I think I got 927 instead of 905.
927.
Yeah. So I think what she just
Yes,
gave
that
you.
is, I'm sorry, let me
Okay,
reread
927.
that. Case CCZBA-927-AM-19.
Great. Motion by Ms. Drago. Do we have a second? Second. Second by Mr. Weisskopf. We have a roll. Now we can have a roll call vote.
Mr. Fitch?
Yes.
Ms. Drago?
Yes.
Mr. Weisskopf?
Yes.
Ms. Yu?
Yes.
Mr. Eckerson?
Yes.
Ms. Billman?
Yes.
Mr. Fell?
Yes. Can I ask a question?
It's just passed. You can ask a question. I haven't closed it yet.
It has to do with the way this was motioned, is it's got a different number here than it has.
It does. It does. Yeah, you're exactly right. Can you, but prior to taking this to council, could you just find out which,
So I mean, we approved the right number, correct? Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, I
reread
it.
well, they're both there. Yeah, they're both there. Yeah. Yeah.
There is only one case before the county board that is within our extraterritorial jurisdiction, so this would be the only one you'd be considering right now.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. It's a good point. That motion passed with clarification. Audience participation. Anybody wish to address the Plan Commission on a matter pertinent to planning? Staff report.
So the one item that you considered at your last meeting was a text amendment for daycares that did not go to council yet. We were just trying to, since there was no rush on that, consolidate when staff goes to council. So I think we're going to try to take that also on April 15th, if time allows, on their agenda.
Great. Is that it? We don't have a study session, therefore we're adjourned. Thank you all.